Hello there and welcome back to Bloodborne. Last time we ventured into the DLC for a bit. Today we're going to be making a bit more progress in the base game. Previously we had killed the one reborn in Yaha Ghul Unseen Village, and now we're going to explore what's past it. A dark room filled with all sorts of people in these weird cage hats. With one sitting in the chair, standing out from all the others at the end of the room. And wearing what looks like to be the clothes of the Bergenworth students. Let's take a closer look at that. Alright, maybe that was too close of a look. We've peered at it so deeply we've warped to another location entirely. The lecture hall again, although a different portion of it than what we explored last time. Previously we explored the first floor of the lecture hall, and now we're on the second floor. It's still as dark and mysterious as ever. Here, the students are just roaming the hallways. Let's try not to get on their bad side right away. Do some exploring first. You may remember that when we explored the first floor way back, that I ended up getting tripped up by a trap, a student waiting in ambush above the item in a room very similar to this. And that's because I was confusing it for this ambush here, where there's a student waiting to ambush you in front of the entrance as you try to exit the room. Oh, and yeah, I should probably address that we're now using Ludwig's weapon, the Holy Moonlight Sword, synonymous with Ludwig. Few have ever set eyes on the Great Blade, and whatever guidance it has to offer, it seems to be of a very private, elusive sort. This is the first weapon that we've ascended to +9, and that's because it's one that we'll be using pretty much for the rest of the game. Whatever weapon we focus on in future videos will have this accompanying it as a secondary weapon, because it is very good and very fun to use. It's especially potent with our jack-of-all-trades build here, because it has scaling with strength, skill, and arcane. And the scaling is strong enough that it's pretty good on pure strength builds, pure skill builds, quality builds, and pure arcane builds, although the strength, skill, quality builds will use it a bit differently than the arcane build will. Master Willem was right. Evolution without courage will be the ruin of our race. A note presumably left by one of the students here, one of the scholars of Bergenworth, Master Willem being the head of the college. The college that sought to better mankind through the use of eldritch wisdom, and who ultimately bore the healing church through a schism between the students and Master Willem. At any rate, pretty much the only enemies in this lecture hall area are these students, and they're really not threatening anymore. They're especially vulnerable to pierce damage, which makes the Holy Moonlight Sword's untransform mode a bit better here, thanks to its powerful and very quick thrusting heavy attack. That said, you do have to be wary of the water urn carrying ones, as they can damage you at a distance. It can take out quite a bit of your HP, especially if you happen to get hit by one of the regular students' attacks at the same time. But as long as you take them out quickly enough, it's really not that big of a deal. This area is more for atmosphere and world building, more than combat. The Nameless Moon Presence beckoned by Lawrence and his associates. Pale Blood. So now, we finally have an identity for Pale Blood. 3 third chords. That must be referring to these 1/3 of umbilical cords that we've been picking up. Clearly, they're an object of great import, although we're still not exactly clear on what their use is. One was used by Willem to line his brain with eyes in order to elevate his thoughts to that of a great one. Another cord was used by Lawrence to beckon the moon presence and ultimately conceive the hunter's dream, which has been our benefactor for quite some time, the only reason that we are able to come back from death. But we don't know what we could possibly use them for, other than the fact that they are, in fact, a usable item. Worst case scenario and we don't find one, we could always just boil them into a stew. And before you shake off that notion as utterly ridiculous, I do want to remind you that people in the real world eat placentas, either as a delicacy or a cultural thing, so it's certainly not that strange, all things considered. Anywho, we're gonna ignore that church giant over there in the meantime, and explore elsewhere. He's rather fearsome, so we ought to save him for last. Here we find another communion rune. This rune boosts the number of blood vials that we could carry at a single time. At this point, that's not really a type of rune worth using with all the other more beneficial ones we have. Alright, so we've pretty much exhausted the other options, so let's go face down this church giant. Rather than wield the weapon, this one here decided to set his fists on fire. I can't honestly advise that strategy, but it's his life, so it's his decision to make. He's a bit more threatening than the others, but that's mainly just because this is the only one in the game with this moveset, so I'm not too terribly familiar with it. Thankfully you have plenty of time to heal in between his attacks, and even though he does have a rather large amount of HP, it doesn't take too long to whittle it all down. He has a chance to drop shards, twin shards, and chunks, but he's not terribly convenient for farming purposes. Here we finally have a path connecting the second floor with the first floor, something we did not come across last time we were here. And that's a familiar face.
Oh, this cannot be. You cannot be. No, you didn't. Lord Amygdala? Oh, how did this come to pass?
So yeah, this is the bastard that originally gave us the tonsil stone and had us accosted by Amygdala. And also the one who pushed us off that cliff in the frontier.
Now, wait just a moment. Do you think ill of me? Me? Oh, it pains me to hear it. You've made yourself a misreckoning. I shared with you a thing most secret. Now you're witness to a miracle, and all the stronger for it. It's plain as a pikestaff. Now, say in my heart, you were as a lamb to my God. Well, you weren't to know, and it wasn't for you to know. All's well that ends well, I say. No matter. Such details are trifling. We're fast friends by now. Let this express what words cannot. Oh, doubt me not, sweet compeer. What is friendship but a chance encounter? Ah, well met. My apologies, but I feel a profound thought occurring on the good grace of a certain god and the way he meted out his love. Ah, well met.
And of course I have to bring up the fact that this here is a recurring NPC in Hidetaka Miyazaki directed games. First appearing in Armored Core 4 Answer as a pilot of one of the mechs in that game, and then in Demon's Souls as Patches the Hyena, a very similarly themed trickster, Dark Souls as Trusty Patches, and most recently Dark Souls 3 as Unbreakable Patches. Here he is Patches the Spider, a former Bergenworth scholar, though that is not preventing him from being a sly, deceptive, cunning bastard. At any rate, let us proceed onwards, through these doors to the outside. When we took the doors on the first floor, it led us to the Nightmare Frontier. These ones lead to the Nightmare of Mensis. If you remember, one of the two major groups of the Healing Church was the School of Mensis. And the School of Mensis was based in Yaha Ghul, and it was from Yaha Ghul that we arrived here. So perhaps we'll be able to meet with members of this school, and finally get some well-deserved answers. But it certainly won't be easy, as there are plenty of nasty enemies in our way. You've seen these horrible sideways-faced wolves in the Nightmare Frontier, but these ones here are a bit different. And that mainly has to do with something they do upon dying should you not kill them with a visceral attack or a fire damage attack. We'll see what that is a bit later, but for now we gotta kill this wandering nightmare here and get more of those sweet, sweet blood chunks. Ow, my brain! So this is this area's primary gimmick aside from having a bell-ringing woman like the Nightmare Frontier. The Eye of Sauron stares at you from a distance and causes constant but weak frenzy buildup. Thus you constantly have to watch that so you don't suddenly lose 70% of your HP in the middle of a battle and just instantly die. That said, this gimmick is not entirely disadvantageous to you, as if you're not an available target and other enemies are, the Eye of Sauron will gladly strike them and do pretty considerable damage over time. I did mention that you typically want to try and take out these lower-end silver beasts with a visceral attack to avoid a rather nasty gimmick they have. But you don't want to concentrate on that overtly, especially if you're not especially familiar with the stagger timing. Ultimately, we do take him down, but with regular, non-fire damage attacks, and so he shows his rather nasty gimmick, spawning 3 of these horrible parasitic larvae upon death. Having to fight these while potentially fighting other enemies such as other silver beasts, or even just dealing with the Eye of Sauron can be rather nasty. So if you're not good at scoring visceral attacks, you want to bring either a weapon with innate fire damage or something that can be buffed and plenty of fire paper. It's also wise to have sedatives on your hotbar so you can cure that frenzy damage at any time if you need to. And yeah, the other gimmick that the silver beasts have that they do in their Nightmare Frontier incarnations, but we didn't really get a good look at it, was that they go on all fours and gain a new moveset when they get to low HP. Potentially they're even more dangerous than when they're upright. But we were able to take him down without much issue. Also worth noting is that the Eye of Sauron needs a direct line of sight to spike you with those frenzy spears. And you can block that with the geometry here, which can make fighting with the Eye of Sauron out much easier. And here I finally landed a visceral attack, and you can see just how good it is at taking these guys out with really no effort. If you can reliably manage stagger shots, it's definitely the best way to take them out. Moving on, we're no longer targeted by the Eye of Sauron, but we now have to watch out for several giant lost children, who will be doing the same as their Nightmare Frontier counterparts, and lobbing one-hit KO boulders at us, so we kinda want to take these guys out quickly. Missile attacks being the best way, again, needing proper timing with the gun of course. These ones are a bit stronger, having a bit more HP, so we need to follow up with an attack after landing a visceral attack. But otherwise they're not especially worthy of note. This bit right here can be a bit tricky though, just because you have that one in the distance lobbing boulders at you. So it's best, especially to use visceral attacks here so you can abuse the iframes that they give you. Once you take down that one, you can collect his treasure, and then rush the remaining one. He does have a buddy next to him, but the buddy takes long enough to get out that you have plenty of time to take him out before the buddy can actually start actively attacking you. And for the nth+1 time, the Augur of Beatus really comes in handy here. I've said it before, but it's pretty much the MVP of all of the hunter tools, arcane or otherwise. And good enough that it's probably worth going the 17 arcane needed to use the item on pretty much any build that you're doing. But enough about voicing the praises of the power of Abriatus. We have finally made it to the entrance of this structure here. Before we go inside, we'll explore to the side here for another blood chunk sequestered away. We want to collect all the ones that are available so we can upgrade as many weapons as possible without me having to grind off camera. I've already had to do quite a bit of that just for twin shards, because I don't want to spend all of the blood echoes and insight we have on those. That'd be the other option. And so we finally enter Spencer Mansion. Okay, no, not really. Although I would love it if the game just suddenly pulled a swerve and had a Resident Evil style gameplay section like Nier. Certainly is sufficiently creepy to be a Resident Evil locale though, with all these nasty spider monsters and their eggs strewn about the place. Aside from that though, do you hear the bell ringing getting louder? Aha, this is where the bell ringing woman was hiding. Now we could kill her to prevent ourselves from getting invaded, but of course we're not going to do that. Keeping open the option to be invaded keeps things a bit tense, and I was desperately hoping to be invaded here just so I could show that off. Unfortunately, I have to spoil that, much like the Nightmare Frontier, it does not happen. Had I done this LP in a more timely manner, we might have been able to show that off, since the game would have been more active, say prior to Dark Souls 3 releasing. But I was rather tardy with getting these episodes out, so it's at a late enough point in the game's life cycle that the PvP is a bit slow. Back to discussing the PvE content. These spiders here aren't too terribly threatening when they're by their lonesome or just in a pair, as they only take a few attacks to take out. Their true threat comes with the fact that there's a literal shit ton of them in this room, along with their giant mother here. So it's best to take them out one at a time if possible. Here we're utilizing pebbles to make them drop to the ground and come after us. That way we can take them out without their mother interfering, and then take her out without them interfering. There's also enough of a stagger between their arrival that we're able to take them out pretty much in a series of 1v1s here, rather than having them all coming at us at once. As long as you handle things quickly, they're really not an issue, but if you do let them group up, they can be pretty lethal, because they do huge amounts of damage and have pretty quick attacks if they get going. Alright, just the mama left, so let's hop down. It's worth noting that if at any point you approach them or hop down, they will all immediately drop, so don't do that. The mother here you generally want to stay to the side or back side of, because pretty much all of her attacks are primarily frontward facing, and if you do get caught up in them, you're probably going to die. Much like her children, she does a ridiculously huge amount of damage, and has a ridiculous amount of outward reach in front of her. Fortunately, butt hugging is as OP as ever in these Soulsborne titles. And yeah, aside from the Insight Shop and Chalice Dungeons, this is the first place in the game where you can pick up the Shaman Bone Blades. Makes me wonder if they weren't originally intended to only be available in the late game, so you couldn't cheese encounters throughout the game with them. Is that a baby crying? Well, we don't really have the time to think about that because we're now fighting another hunter. This here is Quiet Intelligence Edgar. So, much like the school of Mensis had some of their operatives in choir-based areas, such as the Mensis scholar we met outside of Abriatus, the choir has an agent here in the Mensis' home base. He's probably one of the more dangerous hunters in the base game, as appropriate to the fact that he's a very late game enemy. Due to the fact that he does a ridiculous amount of damage with pretty much all of his attacks, and he's pretty damn aggressive. You don't even see his most dangerous attack, which is his Rose Marinis in the offhand there. A holy watering can, similar to the Flame Sprayer, but deals arcane damage. And a side item that we actually have the ability to purchase, but I just remembered that I actually have failed to show off. It is unlocked in the Bath Messenger shop with obtaining the Cosmic Eye Watcher badge, which we got in the Upper Cathedral ward, if you remember. And anyway, back to matters at hand. Looking at these spider eggs, they almost kind of look like pierced eyeballs. Seriously, what is it with Yharnam and the Healing Church and eyes? Insert stock Jerry Seinfeld joke here. And yeah, here I get a bit confused and misremember the location of a bit of treasure. It's over on the left side of this room, not the right hand side. It's really not worth the time we wasted to get it, since it's just another Chalice Dungeon ritual item that I probably won't even end up using. So here we have these adorable little cretins. They are Murgo's attendants and are non-hostile if you don't attack them, so we'll leave them alone. They get a pretty cool fashion sense with those horrible steel masks enclosing their faces. Could it be a shortcut? But we never discovered the lower part of an elevator before. It does lead to the outside portion that we were exploring before, but to a bit that we certainly haven't been to. There's also a lantern here, which is a rather odd choice once you explore a bit more and realize that it is, in fact, a shortcut. We took a path to the left to enter the main building here, but there's also a path to the right, which ultimately leads here, at the underside of an inactive elevator if you come here first. It's easy to miss because it's less noticeable and you're being constantly harried by the Eye of Sauron. So most players end up going up the left path first, and so did I on my first playthrough. That's why I decided to show this off as such. But as I mentioned, it's rather odd that they decided to place a lantern right by that elevator, considering how close by the previous lantern is. It's really only 30 seconds of running and maybe a bit more than a minute of combat if you actually stop to fight these giant lost children. I mean, it's certainly convenient, so I'm not overly complaining, but it is a bit of an odd choice. Much like the low-end Silver Beasts, if you get these giant lost children in the right place, you can actually get the Eye of Sauron to kill them for you. But that's difficult enough that it's probably just better to fight them in combat regularly. And knock them off a cliff like so. For taking them out, we do actually get a very good reward, however. And that is the Eye Rune. The Eye Rune boosts your item discovery, meaning it's easy to farm items. So this will make all the material farming I'll need to do much easier. Disillusioned by the limits of human intellect, Master Willem looked to beings from higher planes for guidance, and sought to line his brain with eyes in order to elevate his thoughts. So that right there is kind of the succinct summary on why eyes are such a relevant theme. They were sought after by Master Willem in order to become greater, and pretty much every other major character follows from Master Willem in some shape or fashion. At any rate, let's head back up into Murgo's loft here, and continue our exploration, even though we are a bit low on blood vials and quicksilver bullets. It would not have been a bad idea to go back to the Hunter's Dream and restock, but we'll make do. More of these attendants wandering about the place. Let's steal their treasure. That was kinda crappy. Come on guys, move! I need to make progress here. I suppose that's one reason to kill them, so they don't block your way as you're trying to progress through here. But that's an awfully rude thing to do. Oh, that guy down there looks considerably larger and considerably more nasty than all these attendants here. I doubt we'll be able to... Whoop. Hey, fucking jerk. Here's what you get for that. I said, here's what you get for that. There we go. So this enemy here is a Murgo's chief attendant. Higher ranking, I guess, than the regular attendants, and considerably tougher, but very easily staggered. And yeah, here's the reason why I wasn't just slaughtering all the attendants horribly. If you ignore them, they will actually come to attack you when you try and attack the chief attendant here. I'm surprised only a few here actually try to do that. Usually it's a whole swarm of them, which can very easily catch you off guard, especially if you don't take out the chief attendant immediately. But things worked out pretty well in our favor here. The attendants themselves aren't really all that threatening. At least the regular melee ones aren't. These ones here are a bit more dangerous, and that's because they wield powerful crossbows, which do considerably higher damage than the regular melee attacks. Yeah, about a third of a health and a bit of rapid poison bleed up. The main danger comes with the fact that there are 3 of them sniping you while you're dealing with this chief attendant here. That's why you want to focus on the crossbow wielding ones first, then you can just take out the chief attendant without having to worry about being sniped in the back. Alternatively, you could try and take out the chief attendant immediately with a stagger followed by a visceral attack, but if you end up failing the timing and getting hit by him and then sniped in the back by a crossbow, you're probably going to die, so that's a bit more risky of an option. Heading further on up, this place truly is quite massive. And it's got cages specifically for carrion crows. That's interesting. I guess someone is keeping them as a pet. And there's a lot more crows here. Those don't look like any crows I've ever seen. Yeah, those are crows with the heads of dogs. And a bit behind them, a dog with the head of a crow. This place ain't called Nightmare for nothing, that's for sure. It somewhat mirrors how the crawlers in the Nightmare Frontier had messengers as a part of their body, and how the Winter Lanterns have both messengers and elements from the doll in their design. This isn't really substantiated by anything in the game, but a little pet theory I have is that the nightmare areas actually peer into your brain and morph some of the enemies based on the experiences you have, and so having encountered many dogs and crows, it fuses them together here and incorporates bits of the doll who we've seen so many times into the winter lanterns in the Nightmare Frontier. At any rate, until we actually get to the boss of this area, there's nothing really especially amazing left. So let's talk about the Holy Moonlight Sword for a bit. Unlike the Ludwig Holy Blaze designed after it, it is a greatsword right from the get-go, untransformed or transformed. Untransformed, it has the moveset you would expect of a greatsword from the series, having a lot of sweeps and a few thrusting attacks as well. Most notably is the fact that its thrusting R2 attack is incredibly quick, and so it's actually pretty damn good at just stun-locking enemies by just repeatedly R2ing them. And its charged R2 is also one of the quicker R2s to complete, making it one of the better weapons for backstabbing an enemy. Overall, it's an excellent greatsword, but there's nothing truly special about it until you transform it. When transformed, the blade becomes coated with moonlight, becoming a much thicker blade with a completely different moveset, as well as benefiting a bit more from the arcane scaling. The untransformed moveset does do arcane damage, but not as strong as the scaling would suggest. Only the transform moves benefit from the full scaling. Rather than horizontal sweeping slashes, it now has a series of diagonal cuts with a few horizontal slashes interspersed between. This actually makes the regular R1s a bit weaker than the untransformed moveset just because they can end up missing enemies in a lot of cases. However, it more than makes up for that with its excellent R2s, which in addition to being sweeping attacks, unleash a blade of moonlight with every one that you perform. As is traditionally the case with projectile weapons, you can hit with both the blade and the projectile to do way more damage than you could with a regular strike, making this excellent for any sort of burst damage. And though it takes longer to fully charge up and thus is a bit harder to land a backstab with, it will consequently do far more damage than any other backstab. Lastly, like all two-handed transform weapons, it has an L2 move, this being a thrust forward which causes a torrent of moonlight. It has pretty good outward range and very high damage, and is also good at knocking a lot of enemies down. Oh, and the R2s in the L2 in the transformed state do cost bullets, so watch your bullet count. These enemies here are skeletal puppets, and they're rather annoying sons of bitches. They do very large amount of damage with their attacks, especially their spams, and annoyingly you can't recover HP from them, presumably because they have no blood, being mannequins. But they're not too hard to take out. They also don't give any blood echoes. At any rate, continuing for...
Cause. Or some say cosm. Do you hear our prayers? No, we shall not abandon the dream. No one can catch us. No one can stop us now.
Wood, we have Mikolash, host of the nightmare, and our boss for the evening. He's a bit of a shy fellow, however, so we're gonna have to chase after him, while being hounded by his skeletal puppets. Ah, there he is. Let's go after him. Hey, come back here, you bastard. So yeah, Mikolash will attempt to run away when you approach him here. Attacking him is very difficult as he runs quite fast, and even if you manage to hit him, he just poofs away. The goal here is to get Mikolash to run into a dead end. Unfortunately, it's not really possible to control that, at least in my experience. Sometimes he'll go into the room that is a dead end immediately, and other times he'll take forever. I'm sure there's probably some way you can manage it, but I always just follow him around until he runs into here. And that's when the fight proper starts. First order of business is to take out his skeletal puppets here. They do quite a bit of damage, as you've seen, and you don't want them blindsiding you while you're focusing on Mikolash, and they're easy enough to kill. Mikolash himself isn't too terribly dangerous. He doesn't actually have a weapon on hand, and so can only punch you with his fists, which do next to no damage, since he's a scholar and all. He does have some dangerous arcane tools, such as the Augur of Beatus, but he's terrible with actually landing it, unlike us. You can simply strafe to one side of him and it will avoid you completely, preferably the left side since he uses it with his right hand. His Augur does do quite a bit of damage if it actually manages to hit you, but again, it's so incredibly easy to avoid. That's not really going to happen all that much. He's really not all that threatening of a boss, and it's really hard to die to him. In fact, he's so weak that he dies at half health.
Oh, majestic! A hunter is a hunter even in a dream. But alas, not too fast. Nightmare swirls and churns unending.
Yeah, the fight's not over just yet. Upon reaching half of his max HP, he poofs away. We need to locate him again, although that can be difficult because this building is quite large. Let's try down first.
As you once did for the vacuous realm. Grant us eyes, grant us eyes.
And while searching for him, he will regularly spat out insane babble like that may or may not have some sort of higher meaning. It's actually kind of annoying because he only has so many lines and he'll often end up repeating a few basic ones. And while speaking, you can't actually pick up items unless you skip through his dialogue first. And yeah, sometimes he'll just straight up yowl like a beast or some sort of insane zealot. If it weren't obvious already, Mikolash isn't really a fighting boss so much as he is a story/atmosphere boss. Something that I'm honestly quite glad for.
As you once did for the vacuous realm. Grant us eyes, grant us eyes.
Bloodborne does visceral fighting boss fights very well, the best of all of the Soulsborne titles in my opinion, even better than Dark Souls 3, which came after it. But at the end of the day, the most interesting fights in the Soulsborne titles, in my opinion, tend to be the more story-based ones.
Ah, cos. Or some say cosm. Do you hear our prayers?
They're not as fun, but they're more evocative, I guess I would say, and definitely more memorable. In a game with a dozen different beast bosses, Mikolash really stands out, and that's something that I quite enjoy. Of course, this isn't going to be to everyone's taste.
As you once did for the vacuous realm. Grant us eyes, grant us eyes.
Fun fact, Bloodborne is actually a Nintendo licensed title, and Mikolash is a distant descendant of Mario. Hopefully he doesn't ask us for spaghetti and meatballs next. But yeah, he disappeared into that mirror there. We're gonna have to search after him. Fortunately, he only has one destination in this case. And that is directly below us, on the other side of this other mirror portal. So let's get the drop on him. Oh, damn it. Tricky bastard. It is possible to land a plunging attack. I did so on my very first playthrough, but have not managed to succeed since, so I'm assuming it was just random dumb luck that causes AI to lag a bit or something. It actually made this bit play out quite differently. Since I stunned him with the plunging attack, I was actually able to chase after him quickly enough.
Oh, cause. Or some say Cosmo. Do you hear our prayers, as you once did for the vacuous Rome? Grant us eyes. Grant us eyes. Grant eyes on our brains to cleanse our beastly idiocy. The grand lake of mud, hidden now from sight. The cosmos, of course. Let us sit about and speak feverishly, chatting into the wee hours of...
I am glad we did get that bit of dialogue, however. It's one that he often doesn't say, and it's one of the longer and more evocative ones he has. I actually did interrupt it a bit with that plunging attack there. Had I let him continue, he would have yowled for a bit before eventually stopping. Yeah, as you can see, this second time he's not really any more threatening than the first.